Hello everyone and welcome to the city of Cadence, our East Coast based city here in City Skylines 2. As always, I'm your host and creator Legio, and if you like what you see, you should do the typical YouTube stuff down below, but I can't tell you what to do, I'm not your dad, though you should still do it. So, in the last episode, we built this cargo harbor that's in front of you, and it's not only aesthetically pleasing, it's also functional. I've been sitting here for a minute watching the cargo ships come and go from it, and we also have trains that are coming in and servicing it as well, so that's pretty cool. It's great to watch a train just come in with a huge payload and then it just magically disappears. Who knows where it goes, probably into the ether somewhere. But either way, it is really cool to see everything's moving and functioning. It's great to see some life coming into the city, you know. But to build off of this, we are going to build ourselves a coal and oil port in this episode. And I'm thinking that's going to go right here on the peninsula. I think if we zoom out, you can agree it'd be a pretty good spot for it. It's right here on this natural harbor. It's across from the cargo harbor itself. And it has some natural shielding with this island right here from storms or whatnot. So just a lot going for it. As inspiration for this build, I was thinking we were going to use Wagner's Point in Baltimore, Maryland. So let me go ahead and pull up Google Maps so you can see that real quick. Alrighty, with Google Earth now pulled up, we can look at a few things that we're going to use as inspiration. This right here is Wagner's Point, this peninsula, which is conveniently located across the river from the Baltimore cargo harbor area. Much like what we have going on in our city, I think they stole our idea, but I'm not going to sue them over it. So here at Wagner's Point, there are a few things I like and there are a few things I don't like. The things I don't like is all the surface parking that's in the area. We're not going to have that. I know it all serves a function here, but it's not going to have a function for us. What we're primarily going to focus on is this area down here. And the reason for that is I like how there is greenery and space in the area. It just looks nice and appealing to me, so I'm probably going to emulate some of this to an extent. The space that really stuck out to me the most was down here. I, for some reason, like that there's a giant open field. It looks like it was used at one point in time, but it's since past that. And this train yard also looks pretty sweet. It's very simple, but it looks cool, and I think I can do something with it in our game as well. I also like the waterfront we have going on here. This is pretty unique. I might emulate some of it, though probably not a one-for-one recreation, because I'm terrible at working at waterfronts in this game. And if we have time in this episode, I doubt we will. It looks like they have a water treatment facility here. I don't know if we'll have time for it in this episode, but I think a water treatment facility does actually make a lot of sense in this kind of space. It gives that industrial vibe. The next thing we're going to use for inspiration is this coal yard up here across the river. And I like this spot a lot, mainly because of the shape and how simplistic it looks, which means it shouldn't be a giant headache to recreate. I think given the assets we have though, could prove a little tedious, but I'll get creative and try to recreate some things and repurpose some stuff. But I think this looks pretty nice, and I think I can do it. Down here, I think we can recreate some of these docking stations to, make the waterfront more interesting. We'll see how that goes. I have looked around at some assets, and I think I can recreate these for the most part, especially this little spot right here that will unload the ships. I think I can do something like that. So those are the main inspirations for this build. Again, not a one-to-one, but we'll see what we can create out of it. But enough of me talking and dawdling. How about we just go ahead and get into the play? Alrighty guys, so while the fast play does its thing, I wanted to give you a quick heads up, as if you probably couldn't already tell, the voiceover for this episode probably sounds a little different. I'm currently away from home and my normal setup on business, which means no dual monitor luxury or my saved audio filters. It's just me, my mic, and one sad little laptop screen. First world problems, am I right? So hopefully this doesn't sound like trash. I'm going to do the best I can. I wanted to get this episode out, and if I didn't do it this way, it would have taken me a lot longer to get things out. So figured you'd appreciate the episode and could probably deal with some different sounding audio. But I digress. We start things off by reshaping the landmass for our oil and coal port. Originally, there was an island here, but I decided to go ahead and attach it to the mainland and make a peninsula, pretty similar to what you have at Wagner's Point. Not the exact shape, but pretty darn close in my opinion. And I did originally want to leave that island alone. I don't like manipulating the map too much on such a grand scale, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense to go ahead and just attach it. In real life, they probably just landfill in the water anyways, so why wouldn't I do that here as well? Once we have our landmass shaped and ready to go, I go ahead and use a rail line to outline what will be our coal yard. And I kept it simple by using an oval. They're easier to work with, and it double backs on itself and completes itself really well. And it's also going to fit the assets that I'm going to be dropping in later very nicely. I then start playing around with the waterfront by adding in some piers. And a lot of these are going to have to be removed because they got way too close to the ship pathing, as you can see. And ship crashing into piers is generally frowned upon. That could cause a lot of chaos, and it's just bad in general. Also, I don't want this space to be too cluttered here on the waterfront. These type of facilities and spaces do need some room to breathe and to operate, so we have to give them that proper space. But one of the piers that remains becomes a transfer dock for our coal yard, which is where the coal would be offloaded and then eventually conveyed out into our yard. And I did have to get pretty creative with this part of the build. I really channeled the creative juices for this one. I built a makeshift conveyor system stand-in using a covered pedestrian path by pretending it's a conveyor belt, and then I used the key tool to create walls underneath it. So if you don't think about it too hard, it does look good and it works. And it does resemble what we saw on Google Earth pretty well, so I'm happy with it. It turned out better than I expected, honestly. It's not perfect, but it's good enough for me, and hopefully it's good enough for you. To detail this space out, I didn't do anything too crazy. I just placed some various industrial props and a few industry businesses to fill things out. An asset that really came in handy and helped a lot during this build was the construction crane you see me use right there. I find the in-game cranes work really well as stand-ins for different industrial features. I kind of use them as bulk unloaders, general cargo equipment, unloading rigs, makeshift pipeworks, stuff like that. You gotta get creative with this game sometimes because the assets aren't there, but either way, limitation breeds creativity, and I'm happy with the way it turned out. With our loading dock now built and in place, we can go ahead and build our landing site for where that coal is going to go, and that's the coal yard itself. And I did my best to echo the real life counterpart in Baltimore. So to do that, I ran a track through the middle of the site, which will come into play later. I went ahead and added in some ore buildings to act as loading and transfer zones, and dropped in a functional ore industry area as well. So we're going to have function and beauty at this site, which I'm pretty excited about. I'm not too familiar with how these specialized industry districts work, seeing as I mostly play this as a city painter instead of how it's intended, but there is an ore deposit underneath it, so we will see how things develop. I think no matter how it develops, it's going to look alright given the backdrop we gave it here. What it will also do is create some jobs because we have a pretty bad unemployment problem going on in the city, and it will bring some life into this area because you're going to finally have some vehicles coming and going from this sector. For the transfer and loading sites, we were able to repurpose some of these ore static buildings, just line them up with the exterior rail where the trains would pass underneath, and they could just drop the coal right into their containers. As for the tall towers on either end of the track, I'm not quite sure what purpose they would serve, but they do look cool, so they're going to stick around. We can make up a reason for them later. Next, I move on to adding the actual coal piles for the coal yard in this area. And these can be kind of tedious to work with, and honestly, I gave up on heavily detailing these suckers. Multiple move it crashers will do that to you. The assets on themselves, well, the props themselves look great on their own, but when you try to stack them together and manipulate them to make bigger and larger piles, it gets really tedious because the heights and the slopes on the piles just don't line up all that well. And without procedural objects, you can't create massive piles. So I did the best I could while saving my sanity with it, but I think it looks good. I went with a lighter touch on them, but looks solid, and I think you guys will forgive me for that. But to make up for it, I go ahead and add in some small little details like these tractors and some trucks. I think adding in tractors throughout this kind of space will really liven it up. It makes it seem like people are actually out there working and moving coal from place to place or piling it up, whatever they do. And during the cinematics, I think they'll look pretty cool because it'll look like a still frame shot. And then I use some of the ore storage yards and connect them up to the rail line we have running through it to act as the, I don't know, extractors, ore movers, coal movers, whatever that technical term would be. I don't know. But those look cool right there. And then I add a whole bunch of surface and decal work here to make the area extremely dirty because that's what you would have here. And then on the back side, I add another rail yard where the coal trains would kind of stage until they're ready to be loaded or go on to whatever they're gonna transport next. Moving back to our waterfront, I go ahead and add in the ground earth unique asset to act as one of our piers. It's sort of a mini scaled down nod to Baltimore's gold bond building. I'll go ahead and put that up on your screen now so you can see some of the comparison, though there really isn't much to be made here. The scale of the gold bond building is massive, it's huge, and I really don't have that kind of space to work with here. So I scale it down and make them look somewhat similar. I do my best here. But what I really use is the receiving dock for the gold bond building for whatever materials coming in, and I use that as inspiration here. So good enough. And I scatter around some of the generic ore piles around the site to emulate that. I don't know what material would be coming in here, so you guys can decide for yourselves what material is actually being used here. You can say it's ground earth, you can say it's salt, you can say it's whatever you want. I don't really care. I just thought it looked cool, so I put it down. So any answer seems appropriate to me. And then using some train tracks and a crane, I go ahead and manufacture yet another makeshift offloading platform for this dock where the material would be coming in from. And I place a slew of props and vehicles to fill in this space and make it seem busy and industrious, and I think it turned out really, really good. Now we go ahead and build out the additional piers on the waterfront, again ensuring they don't conflict with the shipping lane that's running through here to our cargo harbor. I'd rather not have a Suez Canal type incident in our city because that would be really bad. And these piers aren't going to be super detailed or over the top. I'm going to keep them relatively simple, and that still ends up looking really nice in the end. This pier I'm working on here, I use some of these nice looking warehouse type buildings, and then I create a lot off to the side and fill it with some heavy machinery because I thought that would be pretty cool. I see that quite often when I'm flying around Google Earth with, heavy machinery just sitting in a lot on a random piece of land, so this looked good. And then I abused the parking lot quite a bit with the decals because that's become my MO, is just cover everything in decals. And then off on the other side, I use the terraform terrain tool to build us a nice little peninsula and add some warehouses onto it. I don't really know what you would call this, but I see it on Google Earth quite often, so I figured I'd recreate it. It took me a little bit of time to get it just right because the terrain did not want to cooperate with me, so I had to abuse the terrain tool quite a bit. And then I'll just use the tree brush to add in some greenery and the surface tool to touch everything up and make it look really nice. Again, it was nothing over the top, but the end result looks good, and I'm definitely happy with how this waterfront turns out. It isn't overly built, but it does seem functional, which I will take every single time. With the waterfront built, I laid down a rail line between the coal yard and the wharf itself. This kind of setup is a staple of any industrial waterfront. It's how all that cargo actually gets in and out of the harbor. This rail, however, is non-functional and will remain so. It's going to look the part and tie the two areas together, but no trains are going to be coming and going from it. We honestly have enough functional rail cargo in the city anyway, so it's not needed here. Then, to detail the space out, I recycle my use of cranes and make a pneumatic loader of sorts that connect the ground earth facility to the train tracks themselves to act as a transfer system to the trains. Then, to detail the rail line itself, I go ahead and fill in the space with the riverbed surface because that always looks good along train tracks, and run a train netline over the rail and add in a small amount of shrubbery. I also throw in some tank props because it's pretty common to see those along train tracks as well. And between you and me, I'm starting to really love using net lines. I can't believe it took me this long to use them. They're great detailing tools. And staying true to Wagner's point, I leave some green space and fill it in with some foliage. This not only looks good, but it also saved me a boatload of time. You get it? Boatload? Because we're building spaces for boats. God, please don't leave this video. Go ahead and hit the like button for bad puns. Anyways, in another leftover space, I originally wanted to put a lighthouse here on this peninsula, but apparently the game doesn't give us that, and I didn't feel like making one, so that's pretty weak sauce. Instead, I go ahead and put a telecom tower in. At least it has a blinking red light so ships can kind of sorta use it, and it does function, so that's cool, I guess. But this is still really weak sauce. Bad Colossal Order. Give us lighthouses. That should be in the next DLC. You know it should be. Now we turn our attention to the petroleum side of things for this import station. And I decided to build both a natural gas station and a crude oil import with an oil refinery. So there's going to be a lot going on here. First up, I decided to go with the natural gas side of things. And to do that, I built the rail yard that is inspired by the one I spotted on Google Earth. I'll go ahead and put that up on your screen so you can kind of see what we're imitating here. And I do my best to recreate the real life counterpart, but you guys will have to be the judge of how it turns out. I'm not really sure exactly what function this rail yard serves. I assume it's most likely a staging yard for trains, but it looks like you could have some kind of material transferred here. If anyone knows, let me know down in the comments because I'm actually pretty curious and I don't know how to Google search for that answer. But ours is going to be a purely aesthetic station, and I think it's going to turn out great anyways. I do add an oil cargo station in the next stage of the build when we go over to the crude oil side of things. I tried putting the cargo station here, but it ruined the aesthetic and I just didn't think it worked. So we just opted for this to be painted in instead of functional. And I go ahead and add in a little service station in between some of those tracks where I guess you could say oil or natural gas could be transferred to the trains. Again, I'm not sure, but I thought it looked good and we're recreating, so it's there. And for the pipes, I went ahead and used the advanced line tool to place the pipe props in. It's really straightforward and surprisingly effective. Though laying these pipes can be very frustrating. They like to rotate when you do anything near them, such as move it or terraforming. So when you use the transform tool, make sure you lock them into place, otherwise they're going to go all cattywampus. And then I use a concrete surface along with a concrete net line to surround the yard, very similar to what we see on Google Earth. And then I fill out the yard with various props that fit the natural gas side of things. And then next door, I built our natural gas storage site. And admittedly, I use way too many storage tanks to build this out. When I got to the end of the episode and I was flying over, reviewing everything, and started doing my end game cinematics and all that kind of stuff, I realized I have way too many tanks here and this doesn't look right and or natural. So I fixed that off screen by removing quite a few of these tanks and then using Move It to space them out a little bit better. It ends up resembling Wagner's Point a lot better in the end, and it looks more aesthetically pleasing. I'm not really sure what I was thinking here. I kind of just got lost in the sauce, I guess, when I was doing this. But trust me, the end result is going to look a lot better than what's on your screen right now. Next up, I tackle the actual natural gas terminal, complete with the makeshift pier. For the pier itself, I had to get a little creative. I used a static water tank and a few pipe props to act as an offshore transfer point, and then tied it back to the receiving station on land. This is one of the things that you build that looks pretty good far away, but not so good up close. So we're going to keep our distance from it to avoid all that ugly. I'm not 100% sure how these piers work, where they transfer the oil and the gas from the ships, so I'm not entirely sure I built it right, but it looks cool. And a quick Google Earth deep dive shows plenty of these odd little structures that poke out into the water where ships dock in multiple docks around the world, so I just went ahead and built my own. From that pier, everything feeds back into the big station for storage and or refinement. I mixed in some of the game's specialized oil buildings and a handful of storage tank props to sell that look. For extra function and style, I go ahead and toss in a few of the in-game functional waste domes, and they are going to be pulling double duty. They're going to act as pretend gas storage for us and then real life trash management for the city, so that's going to help out a little bit. And I love these domes. Geodesic domes like these are a common sight in real storage facilities. They're structurally sound, cost-effective, and somehow they aren't ugly, which is nice. Here, they help me break up the monotonous look from the typical storage tanks that are used in most of these petroleum-based builds in City Skylines. So that's a really nice little bonus they're going to give us there. Around the domes, I use a sand surface to build a large containment yard for any potential leaks. This is a safety feature common to these sites, where depending on what material you're storing there, you'd have a bowl of sorts to collect any spills. And sand is a good choice because it soaks up most material and it also doesn't catch fire and burn everything to the ground. Sand is the typical choice for natural gas sites, so I chose it here. It also helps break up the concrete look that I have going on everywhere. And these are the kind of things you learn whenever you do hazmat response. So I learned all this from my hazmat response days. So now you guys know me just a little bit better. But on the site, I spent a fair bit of time detailing it, aiming for that gritty industrial vibe while still letting nature creep in a little bit around the edges. The result feels authentic, and honestly, I think it looks fantastic. Now we turn our attention to the crude oil portion of the port to complete the build. The anchor of the oil port is going to be the refinery. Again, I'm making use of some of the in-game assets to help the city out a bit, and also this refinery looks awesome and it blends right in with everything, especially after you recolor it, because I'm not a big fan of that shade of blue or gray or whatever's going on with it. So we do recolor that in a little bit. Realistically, the northeast portion of the United States doesn't have many refineries. I believe there's only one or two whenever I looked on Google. I can't really remember. Most of the refineries are down in the Gulf portion of the US, but hey, Cadence can get one anyways because it's a video game, and we're not going to think too hard about it. We're just going to accept it as it is. My biggest challenge of building this space out was keeping myself from overbuilding it. In my first go of things, I placed down way too many tanks and structures, as you can see, and I made it feel a bit crowded and overbuilt. After I zoomed out and panned over things, I quickly realized my mistake, that I overbuilt, and I go ahead and remove some tanks and space things out a bit more like I did with the other tanks for the natural gas portion. And in my opinion, this looks a lot better. Sometimes simple and open is better, which can be difficult because I see it many times from Skylines players on here, myself included honestly, that we want to cram everything and something into every nook and cranny on the map, which isn't exactly how cities are. They do leave intended open spaces for countless reasons, whether it's not suitable for building, whether they want to leave it open for nature, someone bought it and they just don't know what to build there yet. List can go on and on. So you have to be cognizant of that and leave some spaces kind of open. And even whenever you are building on a facility, they don't always want to build on every square inch. Sometimes the tanks just need a large berthing area. So I had to go back and fix that. I connected the oil port up with the rest of the rail network, placed in the functional cargo station, and complete the look with yet another train yard. Wonder how many of these I can build on this map. This yard, however, will actually see in-game trains coming and going, so it feels a step up from the purely aesthetic yards I have been building. Using the mini oil cargo station as a base, I added in some extra storage tanks next door, and then used the same techniques I always use to detail out the yard. And it turns out to look awesome. I'm very pleased with this space. And then finally, I move on to building the ship berthings so that we can get the liquid gold into our port. To do this, I temporarily raised the land using the terrain tool and then built the keys out while that was there, and then flooded the area in. It was way easier than trying to build the keys directly on the water because that caused a lot of height issues. And I was initially concerned that this space was going to be too small for ships and it would look very cramped, but once I got the prop ship models in, things turned out looking just fine. And I did have to do some off-screen work with the terrain tool because the camera angles on the recordings were terrible. It bounced the camera around, it was just god-awful, and it would have made everyone a little motion sick. When I was building this, I used the Fort McHenry anchorage at Wagner's Point as the general guide. This gave me a pretty good visual to use and work with since I've never built this kind of structure before. This was a new thing to me. And I'm usually lazy with my cargo harbors. I like to slap it down and move on. I don't spend much time on them because they've never been what's held my interest or drawn me into these games. Though with this episode and the last episode, I actually did have a lot of fun building it. So maybe the times are changing. But I think this was a job well done. I'm pretty happy with it. To finish the oil port itself, I reused some of the domes and built a second docking space down here. This could have been one of those times where I was overbuilding, but this turns out pretty cool, so I keep it. I also copied and pasted my pipeline idea from the natural gas section of the port to make this dock to run right into the domes right there. And with the main facilities built, I spend the remainder of this episode just detailing and adding in a few bits and pieces here, and I finish everything off with a large custom parking lot. And all in all, I'm really pleased with how this port came together. Honestly, this might be my best waterfront build yet in either City Skylines 1 or 2. It's got a lot of character, a lot of detail, and it's halfway functional. We'll explore it in a closer look when we get to the live play at the end of the episode, so just enjoy this until then. Alrighty guys, so with everything now built and in place, I figured we'd do our standard end of the episode live look-in, just to kind of admire what we have created. And what we have created here is kind of an homage to Wagner's Point, and a large extension of the port area that we've been working on. And this looks pretty good, sitting right across the water from our cargo harbor over here. So I think as the area continues to fill out, this is going to turn into a very, very interesting area. For this build, we got ourselves a little bit of a unique waterfront here with some piers, repurposing some of these warehouses, just trying to be a little creative here and there, trying to break the mold of what I normally do. We did use the ground earth facility right here, and I think it works. I think that works really well there. I like it. But what I'm actually kind of proud of is this little pier right here where you'd theoretically unload the coal coming into the coal yard. So I thought that was pretty creative. I like that. That looks pretty good. And then the coal yard itself turned out all right. It's not as detailed as I would have liked to have made it. I'll admit that. But I just wasn't feeling it, I guess. I don't know how to explain it. Oop, the screen's getting a little bouncy. But it still turned out good. I thought I was going to do more with it, but I think as it is right now, it's more than enough. And also I don't need to kill the frame rate on my computer. So this looks good. And then this little piece of land right here is like double dipping as an internet lighthouse. It was so random that I couldn't find a lighthouse to work here, so I just stuck that there. But I think it works. It has to work because I say it works. I'm the god in this game. Here in the middle is our natural gas facility. And I like how this turned out. This looks pretty cool in my opinion. Who knows if this is how it's actually made in real life, but if you zoom down and get close, it does look really cool. I like it. I like it a lot. And then obviously the train yards that I'm notorious for building in this game. But this one is unique, and this is a direct recreation of what we saw in real life. So I know this is realistic right here. And then panning out, the whole reason for building this was the oil port, because when I set out to start this build, I knew I wanted an oil port in this spot, and it just kind of grew from there into the gas facility and the coal yard. But yeah, this looks awesome. I did space things out a little bit more, added some detail here and there. Overall, very happy with how this turned out. And zooming out, I think the next episode we have ourselves a bit of a challenge. And how am I going to connect this up? I have a real simple connection in place for right now, but I don't know if that's going to be enough. It probably won't be. So we'll work on that as we move forward. I'd like to find a way to connect it to the highway, but we have this giant train yard in the way, so it's either go over it, under it, or around it. We'll figure it out. Anyways, guys, that's the episode. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did enjoy, please do the typical YouTube stuff down below because I greatly appreciate it. And I will see you in the next episode. Have a good day.